Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Good morning, and welcome to another segment of Capitol Preview. My name is Bill Peard, and I'll be your host this morning. Our guest this morning is Bobby Kaufmann, District 73 Republican from Wilton. Thank you, Bobby, for coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And we kind of just are having conversations with our representatives and our senators about what's important to them in the legislature, what they're working on. So it's kind of a conversational thing. So kind of the first thing that I'm curious about, because we know that we made it through one funnel, the second funnel's a month away, and then the budget process starts in earnest. So why don't you give me a little bit of your opinion of what the state budget is going to look like, or what it's going to end up being, in your opinion?
Sure. Well, for one, I'm glad the funnel week is over. I was a part of several dozen bills, and it was an exhausting week. And so now that we've got our first House policy funnel out of the way, the big question is, what's our budget going to be? And I know we're all anxiously awaiting the Revenue Estimating Conference's final budget number, because constitutionally speaking, we have to use the lower of the two. And so that is going to affect all these different policies that we're trying to put in place as far as what can be funded. So, this year there's a lot of budget constraints with making sure our property tax backfill is paid for, contending with the explosion in Medicaid costs and the shifting of the costs from the federal government. And then you've got the education spending. And so for me, there's a lot of things that are important to me policy-wise, but I'm very anxious to see how big our budget is so we can figure out how big the budget pies are going to be.
Mm-hmm. When's that budget conference due in?
I believe March 19th.
March 19th. And the next funnel is?
I believe the first week in April.
Okay.
So it's coming up.
Yep. All right. Eminent domain. I think that's been a hot issue for as long as I can remember in the state legislature, taking that issue up. So what are the two pending cases right now for the eminent domain issue up at the State House?
Yeah, I've taken on the mantle of being the eminent domain legislator. I've ran all the eminent domain legislation the past 2 years. And we've got a very unique situation this year where there are two projects that are hoping to obtain eminent domain. And they're two really huge projects. You've got the Balkan Pipeline and the Rock Island Clean Line. And what you've got in the Clean Line is a Texas company that is coming here to Iowa, and they want to be in control of 9,000 acres of Iowa farmland so that they can have a direct current line and ship our wind energy out of our state. Now, in theory, I support obviously exporting our commodities, but the problem is the Clean Line has no anticipation of putting in any abilities for Iowans to benefit from that energy. So for me, if you're not going to provide Iowans with the energy, you should not have the right to seize property. And the Clean Line has had over a year to obtain easements with the over 1,500 parcels they're affecting, the 2,200 people they're affecting, and they're stuck at 13%. So for me, it's critical that these two projects have a minimum threshold of willing participants before they're even considered to be granted eminent domain.
Okay, very good. Another hot issue, and I know that you've done a lot of work on that, is the Clark County Supreme Court case. You want to kind of go through that a little bit?
Sure. You've got the city of Osceola and Clark County who have issues with drinking water and need a new existing water source. When they first came about over a decade ago, there were three different options to get water. And they chose the one that was the most expensive, and they chose the one that required eminent domain. And for me, I've got a big problem with that. And I've passed legislation to curb that last year, 93-6. And finally, the landowners heard, the Supreme Court heard their appeal 2 weeks ago. And so I'm anxiously awaiting the ruling to say, I support Clark County getting drinking water. I support them having eminent domain to get drinking water. The problem is some developers and some greedy folks have decided they wanted to triple the size of the lake so that they can put recreational profit stuff on there. And for me, that's just wrong to have farmers' farms taken away from them just to line someone else's pockets.
Yeah. No, that sounds absolutely fair. Another issue that I think you have done some work on is the military funeral protest bill. Why don't you kind of let us in on a little bit of what's going on there.
Well, back in, I believe, 2007, Judge Pratt, a district judge, struck down Iowa's flag desecration law. Said that it was too narrow and that it was restrictive of the First Amendment rights of those that wish to free speech. So the Iowa legislature, and I was a clerk at the time for my father who helped author the legislation that sort of broadened that scope to the point where we thought it was constitutional. Last year in December, Judge Pratt again struck down our flag desecration law. And so of course what you've got is you've got the Westboro Baptists who on Fox News, I describe them as domestic terrorists, verbally speaking, who show up to these funerals of these fallen soldiers, and they use the flag to protest and incite violence and to just demonize these poor families. And to me, that is where your First Amendment rights stop. These families have a First Amendment right to a peaceful assembly, to send off their loved ones in a peaceful manner, and these folks are impeding on their constitutional rights. So we had a bill in the legislature that would put a 1,000-foot restriction on anyone who wished to protest a funeral. If within that 1,000-foot you would to continue to protest, desecrate the flag, or use your words to incite violence, you'd be charged with a felony. And you would also be subjected to civil penalties, so that you could obtain money from them for duress. And that bill passed unanimously out of the Judiciary Committee last week, 21-0. So it's not partisan. We had 8 Democrats and 13 Republicans. And the beauty of the Judiciary Committee is that it's comprised of lawyers in large part. So I think that this law has got some really good teeth and will give protections to those families.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great issue to take up. And then another issue I know you've been working on or were part of last week, and that was the gas tax. And boy, I'm telling you what, I haven't seen an issue that has been so red hot up at that State House for a long time. So why don't you kind of give us your view of the gas tax and kind of some of the background that got us to, I think it passed last Monday, was that correct? Yeah.
Yeah. It was in my 10 years at the Capitol, 3 as an elected official and 7 as a clerk, that was the most contentious issue I've ever been through. And you know, you've got those that do not want to see taxes raised, and I would consider myself a part of that group. I don't wish to see taxes raised, I wish to see taxes lowered. Mm-hmm. The problem and the uniqueness with the gas tax is that it was a part of an antiquated system that used to work back when vehicles got 5 miles to the gallon for trucks and 10 miles to the gallon for cars, and there weren't such thing as electric cars or hybrids. The gas tax formula worked. Mm-hmm. But now, fast forward, you've got vehicles getting far better mileage, you've got people taking buses, you've got Priuses, you've got electric cars, and so the funding is not keeping up with what the costs are. The thing I can best compare it to is if I would ask you to pay your 2015 bills with your 1989 income. Right. Most people couldn't do that. So what was happening is counties were bonding. And who pays those bonds? It's the seniors on fixed incomes. It's the people that don't drive that much every year. They were who was going to foot the burden of paying for the roads, and we weren't capturing any dollars from out-of-state drivers who were using our roads and not paying for them. So I think what the gas tax is a true user fee that allows us to pay for our roads, and it's a constitutionally protected fund that you can't draw from. And so because of that, I felt that it was actually the fiscally conservative route to vote for the gas tax, as opposed to allowing bonding to continue into perpetuity and therefore relieving a complete explosion in property taxes.
Very well said. I know that you are also have the very distinct position of being the chair of the government oversight projects that are currently, or in the, well, I guess, are they currently being discussed in the legislature now? So why don't you kind of go through that a little bit? Government oversight is never a fun
It's an interesting committee.
Right.
Speaker Paulson called me and asked me if I would be willing to be chair of oversight, and I agreed. The uniqueness about the committee is it's one of only 3 that are funnel-proof. So Ways and Means, Appropriations, and Government Oversight are the only 3 committees that are funnel-proof. I also have year-round meeting, and so we meet outside of the legislature, and I also have subpoena power. And so one of the first things I was tasked with was looking into this Fort Madison prison boondoggle. And you've got a $168 million facility that sits empty. And you've got issues that continue to crop up. After a flawed geothermal system was allegedly fixed, and now a smoke ventilation system is trying to be fixed, we found out 2 weeks ago when it got really cold that they had to turn off the pipes in one of the buildings because they feared that the leakage in the roof would cause the pipes to freeze. How in the world you have a leaking roof in a $168 million facility is beyond my comprehension. But we're looking into it and trying to get answers. And then in conjunction with the prison investigation, I'm announcing this week a eminent domain omnibus bill. And I'll run that out of Oversight, and what that'll do is bring all of these eminent domain cases into one bill so that we can attempt to curb some of the property right abuses that are going on in this state.
Well, Representative, I don't want to put you in an awkward spot, but how did that overrun on that cost overrun get to this level? I mean,
somewhere along the way, someone or several people have had gross negligence. And who that is, I can't yet determine, but I'm going to find out, and it's not a partisan thing for me.
No, right.
I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat, a bureaucrat or a department head. I'm not casting any blame, and I'm not looking to cast blame on any particular person. I just want to find out how it is that a geothermal system was installed at half capacity. I want to know how a smoke system still doesn't work and how that wasn't tested. And I want to know who is the person that approved the design to allow a roof to leak in a building that's yet to be occupied. So I don't know who's at fault, but our committee is fully intending on figuring that out, on seeing if the state can recoup dollars, but most importantly, how do we get the prison open?
Well, and one last question, Representative. Do you have a timeline in mind that you think it'll be open? I mean, is there your best guess of when it might be open, or is it still just too far in the or not far enough in the process to figure that out?
When we toured the prison in January as a committee, they had hoped for a roughly 6-month window. Yeah. And so that was then, but now we've got a leaking roof and pipes being frozen, so that's got to add more time onto it. And then to add onto everything, all the staff needs to be retrained before the prison can open. So I would sure as heck like to think that it would be opened up yet in 2015, but my committee's pressing to find out how, fix it, and get it open.
Sure. Well, very interesting stuff for such a young man. A lot of heady questions. Anything else that you want to share with our viewers about what's going on at the Capitol? What's it going to be like now between this funnel and the next funnel? Will there still be the kind of subcommittee meetings that there have been, or what goes on between that first funnel and the second funnel? Sure.
Well, between the first and second funnel, the Senate will consider all of our House bills, and I'll be anxious to hope that they assign those to subcommittees. The House will consider all the Senate bills, and I'll be anxious to see what those look like. But we'll also be doing a lot of floor work, because in order for our bills to be out, they have to be ran on the floor as well. Right. And so I anticipate a heavy workload as far as all these bills that pass subcommittee and committee, having a lot of floor work in the coming week or two.
When do you think they'll assign those? Will it be this week that the Senate will assign subcommittee bills to the House and vice versa? Yeah,
they're eligible to be assigned starting today.
Today, all right, very good. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
You got a full plate.
I appreciate that.
Stay tuned for our next segment, where we will have Linda Upmeyer, Representative Linda Upmeyer, Majority Leader, Republican.